Cristiano Ronaldo drove through the busy streets of New York, enjoying a quiet night after a day of commitments. He dressed casually, comfortable jeans, a simple t-shirt, and a cap pulled down, covering part of his face. Nothing about him drew much attention, and that was exactly what he wanted. After a few minutes of driving, he spotted a sophisticated restaurant with an elegant facade, glass walls, and inviting golden lighting. Outside, a uniformed valet parked luxury cars. Ferraris, Rolls-Royces, and Lamborghinis gleamed under the city lights. Without reservations and without security guards by his side, Ronaldo decided to enter alone, driven by the desire for a good meal and the curiosity to try one of the most talked-about restaurants in the city. He had already heard of that place, the Royal Pearl, famous not only for its exquisite cuisine but also for its exclusive and select atmosphere, where only VIP customers were served. He parked his car a short distance away, opting to walk to the entrance. As he approached, he noticed discreet looks from employees and customers, examining his appearance. Judging by the subtle silence and the glances exchanged, it was evident that many of them were used to recognizing influential people, but no one seemed to realize that the man who had just entered was one of the most famous athletes in the world. He walked through the glass doors. He was immediately enveloped by a luxurious atmosphere, imposing chandeliers, marble tables, waiters impeccably dressed in black and white, and a subtle smell of sophisticated dishes mixed with very expensive wines. The ambient sound was understated, a soft jazz playing in the background. He walked calmly to the reception desk, where an elegant woman with a rigid posture stared at him with a professional but slightly skeptical look. Melissa Parker, the restaurant's head hostess, analyzed him from head to toe without recognizing him. His gaze was not one of curiosity, but of evaluation, the kind of gaze that measures whether or not someone belongs in that environment. Ronaldo noticed her moment of hesitation and already knew what would come next. But instead of being bothered, he just smiled slightly, waiting for what would come. The story of that night was just beginning. Cristiano Ronaldo maintained a calm and relaxed posture in front of the reception desk. His gaze wandered around the restaurant for a moment, scanning the room curiously before finally turning to the hostess. Melissa Parker, the main hostess of the Royal Pearl, continued to watch him, gauging his presence cautiously. She had already served countless celebrities and millionaires in that same position, but for her, the man in front of her did not seem to fit the profile of regular customers. The hostess kept a professional smile, but without much enthusiasm, and asked politely, "Good evening, sir. What can I help you with?" Ronaldo, always calm and cordial, replied simply, "Good evening. I'd like a table for dinner." Melissa's slight furrow of brows didn't go unnoticed by him. Her expression revealed a small trace of surprise mixed with skepticism. "Do you have reservations?" she asked, her tone sounding more like a statement than a genuine question. "No, but I thought there might be some table available." Melissa sighed almost imperceptibly, but her posture became stiffer. She quickly looked at one of the waiters, who was nearby, and then turned her gaze to Ronaldo. "I'm sorry, sir, but this restaurant works only with advance reservations and is frequented by a very specific clientele." The way she said, "very specific," did not go unnoticed. She maintained her professional composure, but Cristiano noticed the subtle tone of exclusivity in the speech. It wasn't just about reservations, it was about who she thought deserved to be there. He raised an eyebrow slightly, curious to see how far it would go. "I see. And how does one become a member of this restaurant?" he asked, maintaining a calm tone of voice without showing any irritation. Melissa hesitated for a split second before answering, as if trying to choose the right words so as not to sound directly offensive. "Usually, our customers are businessmen, celebrities, or important figures." He paused briefly, then added with a polite smile, "Perhaps another restaurant would be more suitable for you." The comment was clear. She had no idea who was in front of her, and at that moment she had decided that Cristiano Ronaldo was simply not someone worthy of being there. Ronaldo continued to smile, but now there was something more to his expression, a studied calmness, almost as if he were testing the environment. He already knew this kind of situation. He had faced prejudice before, either because of his humble origins or for the simple fact of being in places where some people did not expect to see him. And that night, it seemed that Melissa Parker had just made a memorable mistake. But the moment that would really expose the hypocrisy of the situation was yet to come. Cristiano Ronaldo remained calm in front of the receptionist, Melissa Parker, who clearly doubted his presence at the Royal Pearl restaurant. He wasn't surprised by the way he was being treated, but at the same time, he knew that something curious could happen at any moment. And then, it happened. While Melissa was still analyzing Ronaldo with a skeptical posture, the glass doors of the restaurant opened again. A well-dressed man in a perfectly fitted blue suit and a luxury watch shining on his wrist entered the room with confident steps. He glanced quickly around, noticed the busy reception, and headed directly to a nearby waiter. His elegant appearance and the naturalness with which he moved made it seem that he belonged here. Cristiano watched everything carefully. The waiter, upon noticing the man's presence, smiled immediately and made a slight bowing gesture with his head. "Good evening, sir. Table for how many people?" the waiter asked solicitously. The man adjusted the watch on his wrist and replied casually, "Only for one. I'm out of reservation, but I wanted to have dinner here tonight." Without hesitation, the waiter pulled out a menu and beckoned him to follow it. "Of course, sir. We have a few tables available. Please follow me." It was all quick and automatic without questioning. No questions about being a VIP, exclusive member, or having an advance reservation. Meanwhile, Melissa, who was still in front of Cristiano Ronaldo, noticed the scene at a glance. For a moment, she seemed uncomfortable, as if she knew something was wrong, but she said nothing. Cristiano glanced at Melissa and then turned his eyes to the man in the suit, who was now being seated at a table next to a large window overlooking the city. He took a deep breath, still keeping his smile light and discreet. "Interesting," he mumbled, as if he spoke more to himself than to Melissa. He turned his gaze to the hostess and asked in a calm but meaningful tone, "So, are there really no tables available?" Melissa opened her mouth for a moment, but she didn't know what to say. It was obvious that she had just been unmasked. There was a tense silence between the two. Melissa swallowed, as if looking for an excuse, but Ronaldo didn't need a verbal response. The truth was already wide open before both of them. Cristiano said nothing more. He just kept watching the situation, waiting to see how far it would go. Little did Melissa know that the tables were about to turn. Cristiano Ronaldo stood in front of the reception desk of the Royal Pearl, his gaze fixed on Melissa Parker, the hostess who now looked visibly uncomfortable. The silence between them carried a different weight. It was not just a moment of waiting, it was incontrovertible proof of the double standard applied there. He didn't need to say anything to let Melissa know that he realized the injustice. She tried to keep her composure, but there was something about the way Ronaldo looked at her, calmly but also with a commanding presence, that made her uneasy. Finally, Melissa broke her silence. "Sir, as I said, this is a very exclusive restaurant. Our customers make reservations well in advance." His voice sounded rehearsed, but there was a subtle tremor in it. Cristiano raised an eyebrow slightly. "Except when they come in wearing a suit and luxury watch, right?" Melissa swallowed, but quickly tried to regain control of the situation. "You need to understand that we work with a very specific clientele profile. Our menu is highly sophisticated, and the prices are high. Maybe I can suggest another restaurant that is best suited to your style." There was something about the way she emphasized proper that made clear the implied judgment. She wasn't just saying the restaurant was full. She genuinely believed that Ronaldo didn't belong there. Cristiano smiled from the side without showing irritation. He had seen this type of behavior before. It wasn't new for him to be judged before he even had a chance to prove who he was. But Melissa wasn't done yet. She stepped closer and, now in a lower and almost condescending tone, said, "I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. It is best to avoid any unpleasant situation." If you don't have a reservation, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave. Cristiano tilted his head slightly, as if he were pondering the situation. What if I want to talk to the manager? Melissa immediately hardened her expression. Our manager is very busy at the moment. He cannot be bothered by this kind of situation. The choice of words was clear. That kind of situation. She didn't consider Ronaldo a client worthy of the manager's time. There was absolute silence between them. The restaurant, even with its discreet conversations and cutlery clinking on porcelain plates, seemed to have grown colder at that moment. But Cristiano Ronaldo did not back down. He just calmly took his cell phone out of his pocket and slid his finger across the screen. Looking for a contact. Melissa frowned, intrigued by what he was doing. Ronaldo put the phone to his ear unhurriedly and waited a few seconds for someone to answer. Then, with the same tranquility he had maintained from the beginning, he said, "Hi, I'm here at the restaurant. Can you come and solve a little misunderstanding for me?" Melissa frowned even more, starting to realize that something wasn't right. "Who are you calling?" she asked, trying to hide the tension in her voice. Ronaldo did not immediately respond. He just gave a faint smile as if he was waiting for something big to happen. And within a few minutes, something really big would happen. Melissa didn't know yet, but she was about to find out who, in fact, she was trying to kick out of the restaurant. Melissa Parker kept her eyes fixed on Cristiano Ronaldo, trying to decipher his expression while he still held the phone to his ear. Something seemed wrong, but she couldn't understand exactly what. The Royal Pearl restaurant continued to operate normally. Waiters served fine dishes in impeccable china, customers toasted with glasses of expensive wine, and the ambient sound of soft jazz mingled with the discreet murmurs of conversation. But in that small space at the reception, between Ronaldo and Melissa, the atmosphere had changed completely. Cristiano hung up the call, put the cell phone back in his pocket and looked directly at Melissa. His face remained serene, but now there was a different energy in the air. "He's already coming," Ronaldo said calmly. Melissa frowned. "He who?" Before Cristiano could answer, the glass doors of the restaurant opened again. This time, an elegant man in a tailored suit entered with firm and sure steps. All close eyes immediately turned to him. It was James Holloway, the owner and founder of the Royal Pearl restaurant. Melissa tensed up immediately. His body stiffened, and the color began to fade from his face. She blinked a few times, trying to process what was happening. James glanced quickly around the restaurant, as if assessing the situation, and then his eyes landed directly on Cristiano Ronaldo. In an instant, his serious expression turned into a wide smile of recognition and respect. "Cristiano, what an honor to welcome you here. I hope they treated you well." The entire restaurant plunged into a sudden silence. Some heads turned discreetly in the direction of the reception. Customers who had previously been distracted now watched the scene with curiosity. Melissa was paralyzed. His mouth opened slightly, but not a word came out. Cristiano returned James's smile naturally, but did not respond immediately. He wanted to see how Melissa would react. James noticed the strange atmosphere and glanced at the receptionist. "Melissa? What's going on here?" she swallowed. His voice, normally confident and controlled, was now shaky. I, he tried to say, but he couldn't form a coherent sentence. James looked back at Ronaldo, now with a slightly confused look. "Tell me we had no trouble settling you in." Christian finally spoke, his voice calm but loaded with meaning. "Well, apparently I'm not VIP enough to dine here." The silence that followed was deafening. Melissa seemed to want to disappear into the ground. James was visibly upset. He ran one hand through his suit and turned completely to Melissa, who was now avoiding eye contact. "Explain this to me," he said, his voice firm but without raising his tone. Melissa, still not knowing exactly what to say, tried to justify. I didn't know who he was." Cristiano Ronaldo smiled slightly, but this time there was a touch of irony. "Ah, so the problem is not about reservations or exclusivity. It's just a matter of who's who, right?" James clenched his jaw for a brief moment, clearly annoyed. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his composure. "Melissa, please tell me this is a big misunderstanding." She did not answer. He just lowered his head, knowing that there were no more possible excuses. Cristiano watched the scene patiently, without haste. He had seen this kind of situation before. Then James turned to him and said, "Cristiano, I'm really sorry. That shouldn't have happened. Here, you are always welcome." Cristiano just nodded, still with his serene expression. "It's not about me, James. It's about how anyone who doesn't fit the profile can be treated here. That says a lot about a place, don't you think?" James was silent for a moment, reflecting on Ronaldo's words. He knew that night would forever change the way his restaurant would be run, and Melissa, now not knowing where to stick her face, knew she had made the mistake of her life. But the conversation was not over yet. The Royal Pearl restaurant was quieter than ever. The sophisticated environment, once filled with discreet conversations and the clinking of wine glasses, now seemed charged with an invisible tension. Everyone who was near the reception had stopped what they were doing. Waiters, customers, even the bar staff. Everyone was absorbing what had just happened. At the center of this silent storm, Melissa Parker, the hostess who had tried to expel Cristiano Ronaldo, remained motionless. Her eyes still avoided those of James Holloway, the owner of the restaurant, who now stared at her with an impenetrable expression. Cristiano, on the other hand, did not show anger. Her calm gaze and relaxed posture only made the situation even more uncomfortable for Melissa. James took a deep breath and broke the silence. "Melissa, tell me, why did you try to kick Cristiano Ronaldo out of my restaurant?" The hostess, now completely pale, swallowed. I didn't really know who he was." Cristiano slightly arched an eyebrow. "So the problem is not whether I had a reservation, whether I'm a VIP member or whatever. The problem is that, in your view, someone dressed like me couldn't be here." The phrase hung in the air like a well-aimed blow. Melissa was unable to respond immediately. James crossed his arms and nodded slowly, understanding exactly what Ronaldo meant. The silence of the hostess was already a sufficient response. After a long sigh, she tried to justify herself. "Sir, I just followed the restaurant's guidelines. We try to maintain a certain level of exclusivity." Cristiano smiled from the side, but this time his gaze was loaded with meaning. Exclusivity or prejudice? Melissa stretched her shoulders slightly, as if a shock had run through her body. James frowned, dissatisfied with the justification. "You told me that the restaurant works with a very specific customer profile. But look, Melissa, you didn't even question the other man who walked in right after me. You didn't even ask if he had a reservation. She just opened the doors and let him pass." The hostess closed her eyes for a second, visibly annoyed. Christian continued, "That means that in your mind, he looked like the right kind of person to be here. And I didn't." Melissa felt a lump form in her throat. She knew there were no more excuses. James turned to Ronaldo, crossing his arms. "Cristiano, I really regret all this. This does not represent the values we want here." Ronaldo nodded calmly, but his voice remained firm and sharp. "It's not about me. You know that, James. If it had been someone else in my place, someone who doesn't have my name and my fame, I would have been expelled without a second thought." James took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the words. The restaurant, which he built to be a symbol of sophistication and class, now seemed to carry a very different label, a place where people were judged before they even opened their mouths. Cristiano then did something unexpected. He took a step closer to Melissa and, in a low, direct tone, asked, "If I wasn't famous, would you have treated me with respect?" Melissa opened her mouth to answer, but nothing came out. His silence was the answer that everyone there needed to hear. James closed his eyes for a second, annoyed with himself for not having noticed this problem sooner. Cristiano turned his gaze to the restaurant, observing the curious and attentive looks of the other employees. He knew this wasn't just about Melissa. It was about an entire culture of judgment that had settled into this place. He crossed his arms and said, this time to all the employees who were watching the scene, you don't just sell food, you sell experience. But what kind of experience is this if a customer already enters here feeling that they don't belong? The words penetrated deeply and no one dared to say anything. The silence was confirmation that he was right. James looked at Melissa one last time before saying in a firm tone, that will change. Right now. And Cristiano Ronaldo knew exactly what was to come next. Tension still hung in the air inside the Royal Pearl. The restaurant, once a symbol of exclusivity and status, now witnessed a moment of reflection and change. Cristiano Ronaldo remained calm and firm, watching the employees around him. Melissa Parker, the hostess who had tried to drive him out, still kept her eyes downcast, clearly affected by what had just happened. James Holloway, the owner of the restaurant, ran his hands over the jacket of his suit, as if trying to relieve the tension before speaking. He looked at his team, took a deep breath, and finally broke the silence. What happened today cannot be repeated. He spun on his heels, staring at each employee there. The Royal Pearl is a high-class restaurant, yes, but that class needs to be reflected in the way we treat people, not just in the price of the menu or the decor of the room. Some waiters nodded silently, while others seemed to reflect on what had been said. Cristiano remained near the reception desk, listening attentively. He hadn't come there to cause trouble, but to understand the culture of the place, and perhaps to leave a mark that could improve the experience of those who came after him. James turned to him. Cristiano, I want to apologize once again. Not just you, but anyone who has ever been treated this way here. Cristiano nodded slightly without saying anything immediately. He knew that words were important, but actions would speak much more. James continued. From now on, we will implement a new service policy. Every customer will be treated with respect, regardless of what they look like or what we think they can or cannot afford. More than that, he paused, staring at the employees, there will be training for the whole team. I want you to understand that exclusivity does not mean exclusion. Melissa swallowed. She knew that this message was especially for her, Cristiano, then decided to speak. He stepped forward and, in a quiet but meaningful tone, said, real exclusivity doesn't come from what a place sells, but from how it makes people feel. The customer may forget the taste of a dish, but they will never forget how it was treated. James nodded immediately, absorbing the words. Cristiano then looked directly at Melissa. I don't hold a grudge. We all make mistakes. What matters is what you do after them. She looked up shyly, and this time her posture was no longer one of arrogance or superiority, but of genuine reflection. I understand, Melissa said, her voice lower and more sincere. I was wrong, and I will do better. Cristiano nodded, satisfied with the answer. He then turned to James and smiled slightly. Now, can I finally have dinner? The restaurant erupted in soft laughter and relief. The heavy atmosphere was finally beginning to dissipate. James smiled and waved to a waiter. Prepare the best table in the house. He's not just a VIP, he is our special guest. Cristiano laughed discreetly, shaking his head. He didn't need privileges. He just wanted to be treated with the same respect that any other customer deserved. He followed the waiter to the table, while James addressed his staff to reinforce the restaurant's new guidelines. Before sitting down, Ronaldo cast one last look at Melissa. She was still standing at the counter, but her posture was no longer the same. She had learned something that night, and for Cristiano Ronaldo, this was the real victory. That night, the Royal Pearl not only served one of the greatest players in history, it served a lesson in respect, inclusion, and change. And Cristiano Ronaldo didn't just leave with a memorable dinner, but with the certainty that he had left a lasting impact on that place.